Are you looking for quality APA continuing education courses on culture and diversity? Well, we got you covered. We're excited for you to explore our courses that we're offering a 50% discount for our listeners. Use the code FRIENDS50, that's all caps, at the checkout when you register for your courses. Visit us at www.tmcinstitute.org to explore our live and on-demand psychology CE courses. Now onward to today's episode. Our guest today is Dr. Natesha Smith Isabell. Not only is she a U.S. Army veteran, but also a highly accomplished behavioral scientist and strategic wellness leader. For nearly 2 decades, she has been at the forefront of designing trauma-informed, equity-centered programs that guide women through critical life transitions. Dr. Smith Isabell is an award-winning educator, strategist, and nonprofit founder whose honors include multiple teaching and innovation recognitions across global institutions, nonprofit leader recognitions, and distinguished fellowships for civic engagement, community care, and international education. Her work has been celebrated by the U.S. Military Academy, Binghamton University, and the University of Louisville for excellence in scholarship, leadership, and culturally grounded service. She is the CEO and co-founder of the Arabella Wellness Center, where she blends behavioral science with community wisdom to deliver culturally responsive wellness services. Her work spans multiple education, peer mentorship, and restorative care. So today, Dr. Smith Isabell will be discussing what it means to truly show up for yourself and for others with care that is intentional, restorative, and rooted in lived experience. Dr. Smith Isabell, thank you so much for joining this conversation with us today.
No, thank you very much for having me on.
Tell me, you've accomplished a lot. You were also in the military, and then you made a career transition from military to doing clinical work and leading this group practice of yours. So maybe tell us a little bit more about what you're currently working on. Tell us about your projects.
All right, that can definitely be loaded because there are a lot of things that are happening. And so with Arabella Wellness Center, I just want to make sure that it's kind of clear to the audience that we are a digital first wellness center. And so basically what that means is that we provide wellness solutions to individuals online first. And then we have like pop-up community events. So we have not only the services, the individual services that we're delivering, but we also have several community projects that are going on at one time. And then we also provide training to clinicians. Just last week, I completed a training for trauma support services where I focused on the dual burden that oftentimes women veterans face, where they're having to deal with moral injury as well as gender-based violence as a result of their time in the military. So quite a few things we have happening and that I have happening as a part of the center.
Yeah. So a lot of work that is grounded on taking care of yourself. This is kind of the, why you're here today, which is to talk about, as therapists ourselves, how do we be more intentional in helping clients draw that out? So maybe a little bit of just definition for folks, because, we were talking about wellness and we want to make a distinction between wellness versus psychotherapy. Can you maybe elaborate for us what you mean by wellness?
Yeah, and before I get into that piece, I do want to say that when we're talking about wellness, we're talking about not only wellness in terms of how we're providing services to our clients, but also wellness for ourselves, like in that process. And so essentially, wellness is where we are taking care of our own mental, emotional, and physical. And if this is a part of your makeup, like your spiritual well-being, and also taking account of that during client sessions, where we're attuned to how that can impact the overall well-being of our clients. So we have to not only hold space for others, but learn how to hold space for ourselves too.
So really it is I think oftentimes there's a emphasis on just the wellness of the client and the wellness of the therapist. However, you're bridging those two.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And so Anything else you want to discuss or share with us regarding these ideas and topics or programs?
Yes. So a lot of times, and I've actually done a couple of podcasts this year where I focused on burnout recovery. I found myself on the precipice of burnout. I've been in burnout before throughout my professional journey. And what I'm talking about and what we're trying to do with Arabella really is get ahead of that so that we're not reaching the burnout. We're learning how to recognize signs, learning how to slow down so that we can take care of our well-being before we get to that point. Oftentimes we think about wellness as something that I can't get to right now, right? It may feel a little bit overwhelming to even try to begin to incorporate that into our daily lives. But at the root of what it is that we're doing, we're promoting the message that wellness is not a luxury. It's not a side note, that it has to be foundational and it has to be the right of every individual.
As you're talking about this, I'm having a brief aha moment, which is resonating
Hmm.
with this concept that wellness isn't something you wait for later.
Hmm.
It
Hmm.
is something you continue to live
Yes,
and make it a part of your natural daily
absolutely.
experience.
Hmm.
Mhm. And because most of us think about, oh, we get help or we get help when the problem gets big enough. So, uh, do you have any tips to how do we even help folks look at wellness from a different framework? But like, we can't wait till our problem comes up and then we start to burn out. And
Please
I
don't. Yeah.
and of course we want to focus on in this case the women veterans that you
Hmm. Hmm.
serve and really focus on in terms of the often neglected and
Hmm.
overlooked population of care.
Hmm. What I'll say is you have to think about, and this may not be the best example because I know in American society we're not the best at this either, but I say think about wellness as you think about like hydration. It's really not great to wait until you're thirsty to like start drinking water. You should be sipping water throughout the day. And it's the same thing for wellness. Like there are little things that you can do incrementally throughout your day and throughout your weeks in order to build wellness into like your lifestyle so that it's a part of your everyday. And so I said that's where you start. You take stock of what's currently happening in your life and you see where you can incorporate aspects of wellness. So that could be anything from like somatic movement to mindfulness. And mindfulness does run the gamut in terms of it could be mindful eating, it could be mindfulness in terms of just kind of taking moments, it could be breath work, it could be any of those things, but working little aspects of that into your life. Also, boundary setting is a part of wellness too. So, I mean, there are different things that can be incorporated, but you have to start small. Just like with any habit, you start small and continue to build onto it until you are able to kind of improve and fully immerse yourself into that. For women veterans in particular, the biggest thing for us, I will say, because I am a part of that community, is the community piece. Oftentimes, when we transition from service, we feel so isolated. I hear that so much from the clients that I work with, like this feeling of I'm the only one or I'm isolated just because we aren't as visible as our male counterpart. And so, starting with building that community peer network is the first step oftentimes for women veterans because once we can see others like us, then we can start to breathe a little bit easier and then make the connections and then start to build in other aspects of wellness.
By chance, are you kind of related to connecting and building community with women veterans? I have to say, when I was in the VA system, there, depending on which VA clinic,
Mhm.
or large medical centers, there are more specifically focused, women's health centers. There's,
Mhm.
and so I'm curious, are you aware of, or I'm not aware of, any civilian type of groups that specialize in really connecting with women veterans?
Absolutely. Yes. There are quite a few of us that exist. Of course, Arabella Wellness Center is one. We work with women veterans that are transitioning from service. And you have kind of national, so Arabella is more Texas based. And then you have national organizations like Woven. which has created this national network of women veterans that are connecting together. And then you also have the Women Veterans Alliance and then the Women Veterans Foundation. So there, like I said, there are quite a few that do exist. And what's starting to happen now, which I love, and I love seeing this, especially amongst women veterans, is that they're starting to collaborate. They're starting to work across the aisle in a sense, and instead of like staying in their siloed organizations, but looking to collaborate with one another. And
Wow.
so that's very promising.
Wow. I can't wait to get this episode aired so we can actually post some of those resources as well
Mhm.
as your organization to put it out there that there are groups
Yes.
that women veterans can really reach out to.
Mhm.
So I want to go back to, our message, which is how do we show up for ourselves? You talked about boundary settings for ourselves as well as exploring these topics with clients and thinking about wellness as intentional throughout as opposed to waiting till things collapse or break or become a problem. Now, let's talk a little bit more about this last piece, which you mentioned or want to share with us, which is rooted in lived experience. So, how do we show up for ourselves and others based on that in the concept of wellness for women veterans?
Mhm. So rooted in lived experience is really all about authenticity. And so essentially what that means and how I've enacted that in the work that I do is I got into the work, all of this work, because I wanted to understand myself a little bit better, understand the people that I was interacting with and the systems that I was interacting within. And so all of those experiences led me to Arabella and led me to like the specific programs for women veterans. So I am utilizing my own experience as a part of the care that I am providing, and I'm choosing not to silence my voice in that process. I know oftentimes, and it is important to create the boundaries between you as the professional and then your client, but there's also something to be said about sharing in that journey, or at least being vulnerable enough sometimes to share the connection points that do exist. I found that that furthers the conversation, and especially for women veterans that I work with, when they learn that I am a woman veteran, that I went through my own challenges as a part of the transition, I'm not centering my voice like in any session of work that I do with them, but I'm showing them that I do get it, like I understand. And that oftentimes creates like an environment that they feel safer to disclose and be more vulnerable with me. And then also too, the lived experience is some more of that kind of communal work that I was talking about earlier. So we do with Arabella, we do a lot of listening sessions. And so those listening sessions are where we're meeting with those that would be clients for us. And we're learning more about what works for them, how they're conceptualizing like some of the ideas that we're talking about. And we're gathering that knowledge and then in turn improving how we're delivering our services. So all of that is a part of the lived experience, like ours and our clients.
Wow. And it really does take into account how the lived experience can make the care and interaction better. Just
Yes.
like you said, more authentic, really feels real, as
Hmm.
opposed to I'm just here to do a protocol.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Hmm.
Healthcare systems have too many protocols.
Oh, we do. We sure
Yes.
do. And especially
Same
the
with the
VA.
military too. Yeah, VA in the military.
Especially the
Yes.
VA, yes.
All right. Well, is there anything else you want to share regarding, teaching our listeners, how we can show up? And I think there's something to be said too for folks who aren't in the military, like, like myself. How do we serve as allies and still intentionally follow these messages to help women veterans?
Yeah. We couldn't get as far as we've gotten without allyship, right? So I do want to echo the importance of non-military individuals like supporting the veteran population. And what I would say is cultural humility, right? So recognizing what you know, what you don't know, being honest and transparent about that in the process, but also pursuing education. So I mentioned that last week I just did a training with some clinicians, but seeking out trainings like those, and you may see like veteran cultural humility or or military 101 or some other sort of trainings like that, but seeking those out, expanding your network so that you're connected with people that do have different experiences so that you can learn like from those life experiences as well and incorporate some of that into the work that you're doing. But allyship is rooted in heart and education. And so I think those are the kind of the two cornerstones.
Thanks for that tip. And I would imagine, all the things that you're doing, you're very busy. And also, like you said, because we've seen this with peer support services, we've seen this with oftentimes a lot of veterans, because of their lived experience, they do connect very well with their clients and really provide great impact. I'm also curious because of this work that can be heavy,
Mhm.
and yet you persist. So, can you share with us any memorable events or circumstances that influenced how you decided to get into this work?
Yes. So I'll say like my most recent academic appointment was actually at the United States Military Academy. And I was working in that space, working in an area where I was creating programs, supporting the cadets there. And I realized that I still had wounds connected to my own service that I thought I had addressed, but I had not. And so I started thinking, where is the best use of like my skills? Where can I continue to heal and grow? What should I be doing right now? Because even though the work that I was doing was impactful and it had meaning, there was still something missing there. There was still a disconnect for me. And like I mentioned, like some things were kind of coming up for me. And I realized that I needed to go back into clinical work because I stepped out. I wasn't doing any sort of clinical work. So I was just in higher education. And so I decided to go ahead and pivot back into clinical work. And that's when I made the shift from West Point to the Department of Veterans Affairs. And I was working there. I took a position to work in what we call the task. It's like a suicide prevention center within the VA. And so I took the position to work in that space. And that forced me to tackle some of the things that I had not been willing to tackle, part of which was my relationship with the VA, my relationship with being around veterans in uniform. So active duty service members. I could be around veterans that weren't in uniform, but it was something about that uniform that still had a hold on me. And so once I pivoted into that work, it just kind of stretched me in ways that I needed to grow in order to be successful in what I'm doing right now. And in order to be able to show up more genuinely, I started to tell my own story a little bit more as a result of pivoting into that VA position as well. And it has been extremely helpful and cathartic. That entire process has been. But that is kind of a key pivotal moment for me, was that transition from working in higher ed technically still to working in clinical care.
Wow. So, Dr. Smith Isabell, if it's okay, you mentioned part of your journey and being able to share some of your story. May I ask, can you share with us a little bit of that story?
I can. I mentioned kind of earlier on in our talk today that I did a session last week that talked about the dual burden, right? The moral injury and the gender-based violence. So my story intersects with that directly. I experienced both. The gender-based violence was military sexual trauma that I experienced during my time on active duty, and the moral injury was also related not only to the gender-based violence, because my experience of trauma happened as a result of a soldier in my unit, but the moral injury also stems from how the military, the Army in particular, responded to me as someone that was hurting, as a soldier that was hurting. Not only do I have the experience of military sexual trauma, but I also have the experience of, while I was going through my initial training with the Army, I ended up hospitalized because I had multiple blood clots in my lungs. And I share that because my thinking had nothing to do at that time with my health, with whether or not I was going to survive, what that was going to look like, but it had more to do with how was I going to be perceived and whether or not I was going to be recycled through like my class, or whether or not it was going to have some sort of negative or adverse effect on my military career. And that's just because of how the system is structured and designed. Like there isn't a lot of care for the individual. And I do understand like some of the limitations that the organization has with that regard, because you are talking about missions that have to be accomplished. But at the same time, experiencing it did create this rift. And so the moral injury and the military sexual trauma are things that I experienced. Yeah.
Gosh, I'm sorry that you went through that. No one should have to go through that. That's horrific. And you're actually addressing something that I can say just, as well, working in the VA system, you do hear about these experiences. And there is a misalignment where you hear this conversation thrown out there a lot. It's mission critical, mission critical,
Yes.
that phrase.
Yes.
And then I would imagine that must have been such a red flag, or like just a pivotal moment when you recognize, wait a second, rather than being concerned about my health, I'm getting a blood clot, and then also someone who I trust in my unit, and then suddenly,
Yeah.
instead of worrying about myself,
Yes.
I am worrying about, oh, how am I going to be perceived? Am I going to finish this mission? Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. So, I mean, having gone through just all these challenges as a woman of color, how did you overcome this?
I think this phrase kind of ties it all together for me. There is something to be said about post-traumatic growth. How you can take your trauma, learn from it, and be able to help others as they're navigating their own trauma. And that is essentially my life's work right now. So taking all of these experiences, which is why it's communal, which is why it's lived experience, which is why it's like all these different things, taking my own experience, sharing it, sharing just enough of it so that people can connect and understand that I recognize and can understand and empathize with aspects of their story, so that they can then release and begin to move forward in the way that makes the most sense for them. And so post-traumatic growth is how I'm at this point right now, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. And that growth, to learn from it and also to connect, is so important,
Yes.
because the experience that you had was so isolating.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So lastly, Dr. Smith Isabell, for you, what does it mean to be an African American clinician?
So something that we sort of internally say within Arabella, it has to do with precedent, that it is set by our presence. And so essentially, I recognize that I am oftentimes entering into spaces that were not designed or created for me, but I am still here. I still plan to be here. And I am figuring out as I enter into these spaces how I need to reshape them so that others coming behind me can be comfortable in this space. And what it means to me essentially is that I am attuned to not only what others like me may need, but also what changes need to be made within the systems that I'm a part of.
Wow. You're paving a way for folks in the future, because
Trying
hey,
to,
yeah,
yes,
trying to,
trying to.
yeah, yeah. Hmm. Hmm. Well, Dr. Smith Isabell, anything else you want to share with us today?
I think the only other thing that I would share is just kind of the question, right? I like reflective questions. I think a lot of us do as clinicians, but if you ask yourself like this question, what would shift if you treated your own wellness like a strategy and not a side note? What would things look like for you day to day, week to week, month to month? How can you begin to show up for yourself as well as show up for like your client?
Great reflection question. because it does make you think more critically about how you're doing things rather than just automatically
Yes.
suddenly get absorbed by
Mhm.
the system around us, the system of capitalism, the system.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I want to say that you truly are a hero. I'm not just the clinical work, but just all of you, your whole experience, to be able to stand up today, to be able to continue to advocate for yourself, for others, to also help shape those who are reaching out to you in the community that you're creating. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
A huge thank you to our listeners. If you enjoyed this episode, please share and subscribe to People of Color in Psychology. You can also support us by registering for continuing education courses or making a one-time donation on the Multicultural Counseling Institute's website. Your feedback is important to us, so feel free to send an email, a message on LinkedIn, or leave a voice message on our website. Until next time, this is your host, Jack Sun.